Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and strange things from other worlds. I'm Reverend Clifford De Niro. No relation. We have gathered here on this mournful day to bid a reluctant farewell to a dear and beloved friend. A friend that we have all treasured and relied on to be there for us whenever we needed it to be. And for nearly 50 years, it was there. We thought it would always be there, and it might have been but for the arrival of several people. Several people who are here with us today. But let's ignore that for the time being. For the time being, let's remember all the things we loved about our lost friend. The fun, the excitement, the coolness. Who can ever forget the first time we saw the Millennium Falcon, the coolest ship in the galaxy? Who can forget that first time we saw the Falcon make the jump to light speed in A New Hope? Yeah, you damn right, it was awesome. It sent our young hearts to flooding. Add to that, the space battles, the light speed chases, lightsaber fights, all the alien species. And the villains, all those evil, cool villains, from the Emperor to Darth Maul and General Grievous, all the way up to the Mac Daddy Darth Vader. Star Wars filled our childhoods with the stuff that dreams are made of, and that's why we bonded so deeply with it. We either save our pennies or beg our parents for the money to go to the theater, or pop the VHS, DVD, or whatever technology we had to view our own copy of when we introduced our own children to that wondrous galaxy far, far away. It's a special thing when something in life becomes so meaningful to us that it becomes a part of our lives for the rest of our lives. That's what Star Wars did. It was something that didn't just entertain us. It became a part of us. A part of us that we couldn't wait to share with our children, after which it inevitably became a part of them as well. And so it went for generation after generation, adding legions of new fans on top of the previous generation, growing exponentially upon itself. Then, something happened. In 2012, George Lucas decided he'd had his fill and wanted to retire. A perfectly normal course for a man to take as he was getting on in years, and he told all the stories he set out to tell. It was at this point that several major mistakes were made. Mistakes that precipitated the downfall of the entire Star Wars phenomenon. The first mistake was that George Lucas named Kathleen Kennedy to replace him as president of Lucasfilm. This put her in charge of the creative decision-making over all the Lucasfilm properties, which included the two biggest properties in Hollywood history, Star Wars and Indiana Jones. It seemed like a safe decision at the time. After all, Kennedy had been a producer over the past 40 years, and her name was on many very big movies made by a number of very big directors, including not only himself, but Steven Spielberg, Richard Donner, and Bob Zemeckis. So, on the face of it, it looked like she knew what she was doing, when, in reality, her entire career had been an illusion. She was a parasite who attached herself to people of exceptional talent and offered them nothing more than handling paperwork, securing the financing, and getting coffee. At no time did she ever contribute to any of the creative decision-making, so despite her name being on numerous movie classics, across many different genres, her contributions were always negligible. So when Lucas named her his successor, he had unwittingly promoted her far beyond her talent and capability. Medical science calls this the Peter Principle. It's a real thing. Look it up if you're curious. Once in place, she in turn hired more people who were not qualified to shepherd the Star Wars brand into greater success. Instead, she held a misguided agenda of feminism and pro-LGBTQ propaganda. Her goal became to take a sledgehammer to all that George had built and remake it in her image instead. An act of arrogance and hubris that defies comprehension. Star Wars became a brand whose primary goal was to advance Kathleen Kennedy's personal agenda at the expense of story, character development, and entertainment. Under Kennedy, the message became the tail that wagged the dog. She also made the determination that Star Wars, as it had existed under George Lucas, needed to be revised as a more female-centric property, which led to her misguided, the Force's female debacle. An ill-conceived notion that everything Lucas had created was to be replaced with an all-new strong woman and girl boss mythology that has tanked the franchise ever since The Last Jedi was released. Steven Spielberg had remarked in an interview that Kathy Kennedy was always the person with the worst ideas, and that he was never impressed with her talent or professional capability. Now we all know why. The woman is a talentless hack whose entire career has been to attach herself to people of greater talent and bask in their reflected glory with nothing of her own to offer. Unfortunately, this was the person George Lucas chose to run his empire after he was gone. That was mistake number one. Mistake number two was selling his empire to the Walt Disney Company, a creatively bankrupt studio under the leadership of Bob Iger, arguably the worst CEO in Disney history. This is a man who thought he could simply buy his way to the top by overpaying on every successful company he could acquire. Lucasfilm, Pixar, Marvel, who, when he bought them all, were flying high with hit after hit. But as soon as Disney had acquired them, they all began a downward spiral of failure upon failure that has led to loss of billions under his incompetence. Star Wars fell into a misguided mythology of woke garbage, girl boss tropes, and that same disease infected Marvel and Pixar, and this has been behind the endless string of ongoing box office failure, as well as the precipitous decline in Disney company value as reflected in their falling stock price. These are the two mistakes that doomed his creations. He left the wrong person in charge and sold his company to the wrong buyer. And we, the fans, are the ones left out in the cold wondering what went wrong. Well, now you know, Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger were put in charge, and the end result of so much stupidity and incompetence is the reason we're all gathered here today. I don't think George is to blame for this fiasco, but I am angry. I'm angry at what's been lost so needlessly. All because of the arrogance of two genuinely stupid people, neither of whom have ever contributed anything of value of their own. Kathy Kennedy never made a film that was her vision and was then embraced by the world, and Bob Iger never built a business of his own from scratch. Both of the individuals simply latched on to something big that had been built by others, then tried to remake it into something they could lay claim to. Bob Iger leashed off what Walt Disney had built, and Kathy Kennedy leashed off what George Lucas had built, and then both of them ruined the bodies they had infected. I'm sure when George Lucas appointed Kennedy to run his company and sold his empire to Iger, he thought he was being responsible with his life's work and that it would be cared for and grown according to the strategy he'd laid out for them to follow. Lucas had been assured by both of them that their intention was to nurture his life's work by following his plan. But no sooner were the contracts signed and the money paid did they both go back on their word, toss out a strategy, and immediately started working to erase George's influence on all Star Wars content moving forward. Imagine the arrogance of these people, that they had their own ideas that they were sure were better than anything Lucas had ever come up with. Well, they were not better, but infinitely worse, and the Lucas empire now lay in ruins because of it. Of course, these people accept no blame for the devastation they brought to absolve themselves of any responsibility. They say it's all the fault of the fans, especially all those horrible toxic males. Well, to this, I can only offer one piece of advice: to see the true architects of all this chaos. One need only look in the mirror, Ms. Kennedy and Mr. Iger. Just look in the mirror. The truth will be staring back at you. Thank you, one and all. Thank you. Truly thank you, and may the force be with you.